Hey there guys, Demo73 here on a Sunday, bringing you a kind of recap of all the spoilers we got over the last week for Advent of the Demon King. So they are doing 4 cards a day, 5 days a week now, so to kind of make up for that, I'm going to be doing weekly spoiler video coverage, rather than doing 1 video a day, just to kind of help with you guys, so you don't get overloaded with just 4 cards every day. But let's go ahead and just jump in. We have something for every attribute, and we're going to be looking at this crest stuff first. So I'm going to start with Light, with our Light Bhajan, who's a 2-drop 6/6 with Crest of Light. So if you control a light magic crest, which we'll see here in a little bit, it gets to trigger, and when it enters the field, you get 4 +1/+1s. So if you have Light attribute the crest, this guy can come in as a 2-drop 10/10. So that'd be pretty okay. We just got to figure out what the crest means, because if the crest isn't worth it, then he's not worth it, and he's just a generic 2-drop 6/6. Next up, we have the Magic Crest. So it's a 1-drop. When this card enters the field, distribute 4 +1/+1 counters on top up to 4 target resonators. So you can kind of use this to buff up some stuff and kind of make it situational. I'm not necessarily sure how I like this card. If you're playing it on your 1-drop so you can try to play the other guy on turn 2, then this is just wasted. You just didn't do anything on your first turn. So this is actually pretty mediocre in my book. But we'll understand why these crests are kind of important as we get a little bit later. So overall, this card isn't super great, especially if you're trying to play it kind of on curve. But, you know, it is kind of cool to be able to potentially buff up a board, that kind of stuff. I could definitely maybe see this being used in Vampires, you know, as a cool way to just subtly make a Rinka massive, or something like that, and get her to be able to start attacking stuff, but we'll have to see. Next up, we have Ra, the Golden Bird, 2-drop 2/8 quick cast flying. When it enters the field, change the target of target spell or ability with a single target to this card. So it's kind of like a lightning rod. You quick cast it in, he becomes a lightning rod. And if he becomes targeted by something, you draw a card. So you flash him in, you draw a card, and you redirect something to it. And then you can also, for 2 white, change the target and make him a lightning rod again. This is pretty interesting. I definitely think it's going to be something that's going to be sideboarded, especially since it's double white. There's not a lot of stuff right now that I think main board double white is that great. But I do think this card has some potential, and the fact that he's got that 800 defense means that on certain things, he's just going to be able to survive and can lightning rod things away, which I think is excellent. Next up, we have Winds of Gold. 1-drop quick cast gives something barrier or yourself, which I think is very interesting. J/Resonator or yourself, and if you control Ra, then it's free. So I think this card is best if you have Ra, but that means you have to, again, commit to playing Ra, which isn't necessarily, with this kind of unknown meta we're in, something we're really going to be needing to look at. But who knows, if we get to a more control-heavy meta, then Ra could definitely stick around and be more important. So next up, we have the Fire stuff. Fire Bhajan, 1-drop 4/4 with red crest, that if it enters with that red crest on, it deals 6 damage to target player or resonator. I really like this card a lot. I think that he probably is one of my favorite Bhajans so far, just because his stat line as a 1-drop is pretty good. 4/4s with even with no effect is pretty good for a 1-drop. And if you happen to have the crest, he becomes a better Thunder. So he just enters, can kill something that's 600 or less, and can also serve as a Thunder to your opponent's face. So I think the fact that he's burn damage to your opponent or to a J/Res, I think is pretty good. Then we have the Magic Crest of Fire. It's 2-drop that when it enters the field, it deals 600 damage to target resonators. So again, if you're thinking about the idea of maybe playing a crest into a Bhajan on turn 3, you go crest, burn something for 6, Bhajan, burn that same thing for 6. You can pretty much kill any relevant creature in the game at this point. That's pretty good. Next up, we have our ruler. So he's our first ruler that we've seen. Welser the Archmage. So he's a wizard. He's got Judgment of 5 colors. It energizes for red. And you can rest a recovered crest you control to produce an attribute, a will of the attribute that matches the crest. And you can only do that to do his Judgment. So essentially, you're going to play crests, use crests to Judgment and flip him over. But he can also pay the attribute of Wicked Spirits or Magic Crests with Firewill. So you can kind of play those Bhajans with just Firewill, which I think is interesting. Doesn't really do much else on his other side. He flips over into Welser, King of Demons. This is pretty interesting. 15/15 when he enters. and you can put a Wicked Spirit from your hand into the field as soon as he enters, which I think is also great. He gains Swiftness if you have 3 or more different crests, and Imperishable and Precision if you have all 5. So if you get all 5 of them out there and you can stick them, he's an Imperishable, 15/15, which is pretty crazy. And then when this card enters the field or whenever it attacks, your opponent puts 3 -1/-1 counters on everything they control. I think that's also very crazy if you consider him having Swiftness. So then you play him, he's a 15/15, you swing him, he gives everything -3/-3 permanently because it's counters, swings again, puts -3/-3 on everything again. So even if they don't block, suddenly, hey, what's up? Their whole board is -6/-6, and they can't really do anything out of it as long as those creatures are still on the board. I think that's pretty nutty, especially if we're going into like a meta where we think elf tokens or elf spam is going to be pretty relevant. If Welser's able to flip at all and swing even the same turn, that's pretty much probably GG for most elf decks. They just lose everything. So that's pretty interesting for me, for sure. Also, this armor is just awesome. Next up, we have the water stuff. We have Duplication Mirror, 4-drop Treasury. It says, when it enters the field, you choose a non-Magic Stone, non-Jade Ruler entity, so somewhere on the field, and this card enters the field as a copy of it. So as it comes into play, it comes in as a copy of whatever you chose. And then it doesn't target, which is pretty interesting. So I have to choose if it's choose one that's already on the field, or if you can... Yeah, because you're copying it. So if there's something on the field that you're like, hey, that'd be really nice if I have, you just play this Duplication Mirror and bam, you've got it. Also, it's a treasury item, so Kakia could use it potentially to help out a lot of other things. Make a second moon, make one of your opponent's really big creatures or whatever. And the other thing is you got to remember it's a copy. So like if you have a Night Moon Blossom that's already pumped up by a bunch of kimonos, then you can play Duplication Mirror. Comes in as a copy of the thing, but it's already got the pumps on it, so Duplication Mirror would come in pre-pumped and would get to stay there even if the kimonos got killed for any reason. So that's pretty interesting. Next up, we have the Crest of Water, 1-drop Ancient Crest. When it enters the field, you draw a card. So pretty simple, blue cycling, nothing crazy. And then the Shayla's Return, 1-drop quick cast. Return target Resonator with cost 4 or less to its owner's hand. This is very interesting to me. Just 1-drop, anything that's 4 or less back to your opponent's hand. Something that we used to have a long time ago was a card called Alice's Pursuit, which is a 1-drop 5. When it was originally printed, it said 5 or less and draw a card. It was actually supposed to be 5 or more and was quickly eroded. But if this drew a card too, then it'd be like, oh, Alice's Pursuit is back. But this is still an interesting effect for probably much cheaper to be able to just say, put it back in your hand, and it doesn't have a requirement of being raining. That would have been a cool thing to say, if it's raining, also draw a card, but it is what it is. Next up, we have the Water Majin, 2-drop 6/6. So one of the Majins that actually can play on curve. And if it has the crest when it comes into play, then you get to draw a card. So the water crest is essentially cantrip, which is pretty interesting. So I like that a lot. Except we have green, we have Destruction of the Portal, 2-drop quick cast Remnant, destroy target addition. I actually really like this spell. The fact that it has Remnant is really nice, and the fact that it's 1 green is also really nice, because Heavenly Gust is double green and sometimes really hard for people to cast, as well as having Remnant means that if it gets discarded, you can still potentially use it. So I actually like this as addition hate for sure. I think it's pretty balanced, so I'm just a fan. And we have the Magic Crest of Win, 3-drop, gets to ramp the top stone of your Magic Stone deck into the field when it comes into play, so essentially will cost 2 to play. And then we have the Otherworld Dreams. Now this spell, I have to talk about this a lot, so this spell is by far the thing that people are freaking the most out about, so let's read it real quick. So it's a 1-drop quick cast, cancel target spell your opponent controls, so that can be anything they cast. Then your opponent may play a card with total cost equal to or less than the total cost of the card canceled this way from their hand without paying its cost. Yes, so there's a few things to consider here. 1, yes, that second card counts as their second card for the turn, so it can be Severing Winds. So that's step A, or point A. Point B is that the card being cast off the Otherworld Dreams doesn't like isn't specified by timing requirements. So like if you're playing a quick cast on your opponent's turn and they cancel it with Otherworld Dreams, you can just play a Resonator even if it doesn't have quick cast, because it's kind of like Otherworld Dreams is what puts it on the chase, so it kind of gets to bypass its timing, at least from what we know so far of this spell. Here's the other thing to note about this though, that if your opponent has the Severing Winds to back up Otherworld Dreams, then that Severing Winds counts as their second spell for the turn, and you can just Severing Winds them back. So lots of Cancel Wars I see in our future. It is 1 green, but this card can be pretty heavily punished, I think, if not backed up by a Severing, or if you kind of out-counter your opponent. Could potentially just really hurt some people, especially if you consider cards like Final Battle, where you can play it with 1 will and then pay a bunch of life to make your costs, total cost pretty high, and then bring in like a 7-drop from your hand off the Otherworld Dreams, even at 2 stones. Could potentially be game breaking to your, to what happens there. It's like, oh well, this sticks. I stuck in Tamir. Now I have a board full of stuff. Good luck. So definitely a card that you kind of have to think about the risk of whether or not you play this or Farrer's spell. I think this kind of either serves as an upgrade for it or replaces it, or you kind of play one or the other based on what you think the matchup's going to be. So next up we have the Win Bhajan, 4-drop 9/9. That if you have the Crest, you get to search for a magic stone of your choice and put it into play. So that's pretty interesting, and it's also very nice that this again curves on point. So you play the 3-drop Crest into the 4-drop Win Bhajan. I like that a lot. Unlike the light one, they all just kind of seem to. That one seems to get the most value out of it, unlike the red and the white ones do. Now we go to the dark. We have Advent of the Demon King. In my opinion, this is probably my favorite actually spell so far. Obviously Otherworld Dreams is strong, but I like this card a lot. It's 2-drop and 1. Choose 1. J Resonators gain -5, so it's a board wipe for 3. Pseudo. Or, if your ruler is Welser, you can pay 0 to do Judgment until the end of the turn. So here's the reason why I like this a lot. This means that Welser technically doesn't have to play all 5 crests, or play a 5-color deck to be able to do Judgment. You can play a couple copies of Advent of the Demon King and maybe play 3 crests so that you get access to Swiftness, and play a 3-color list and still be able to play him strongly and do the flip very, very easily thanks to this spell. And I think that's really important for him. Not having to play 5 colors for him, I think, is really nice. Then we have Beelzebub, the Lord of the Flies, 5-drop 15/15, Wicked Spirit with flying, so he is a Wicked Spirit, which means Welser can bring him in for free, and I think Welser wants to bring this guy in for free more than anything else because of the effect. So when he comes into the field, he gets 5 -1/-1 counters. When a Resonator your opponent controls with a -1/-1 on it is put into the graveyard from the field, you put a -1/-1 on him. Now you remove a -1/-1 counter from him to move it to something else, another Resonator. So here's why this is important to bring in with Welser. So Welser comes in, enters the field, and you get to choose how the triggers go off on terms of the -3/-3, the 3 -1/-1 counters, and the enter effect. So what you can do is you can bring in Beelzebub first. Make sure that resolves first, so he's on the board. And then the -3, the 3 -1/-1 counters can go on everything and start killing stuff, which then puts stuff on Beelzebub, but then he can like start shipping more -1/-1 counters onto everything else that's on the board too. So like Beelzebub plus Welser flipping, especially against a wider board, is probably just going to wipe their board just for the Judgment. And if you consider the fact that you probably did Judgment for free that turn because of Advent of the Demon King, you potentially have a 3 mana, suddenly you have 2 15/15s, and you're swinging for 15, and you're hurting them for a ton of damage, and lots of big things. So I definitely see this card being pretty important as probably the kill card for Welser decks, especially against if Swarm decks kind of get big. So this is very, very interesting. I'm definitely interested to see how this goes. So we have our Darkness Bhajan, 3-drop 8/8, that if you have the Crest, it destroys a target Resonator with total cost 2 or less. So comes in as an 8/8, kills something. That's pretty good stats. We just gotta make sure that the Crest is something we don't, we wouldn't want to be able to play. And thankfully enough, it curves really nicely, so it's a 1-drop. Says when this card enters your field, put target Resonator from your graveyard into your hand. So it's just oh, you maybe discard this, or this died earlier, I can play this and bring it back. Especially if they maybe discarded your Beelzebub or something else. So really happy that the crest kind of curves nicely and kind of fits in with what the dark crest goes. So my opinion, I think the best crests right now are probably red, green, and black. Blue is nice to be able to draw cards, but I think red, green, black is probably the best crests overall so far. They have the most impact. So, but let me know what you guys think. Again, that's a lot of spoilers. There'll be another spoiler video this coming Sunday after we have another week of the spoiler stuff. Unless you guys would like me to try to do 5 videos a week, just let me know in the comment sections down below. But looking forward to seeing you guys this week for the feature match. And until next time, this is DMO73 signing off.